I'm your host, Javier Betancourt, Executive Director of the Citizens Independent Transportation Trust, or CITT. We're the quasi-independent agency of Miami-Dade County charged with overseeing your half-penny sales tax for transportation. So as you know, we have folks from all walks of life here on the program to talk about mobility and the intersection of transportation with a host of all other issues. And we, of course, love speaking to elected officials who are at the kind of in the trenches on these issues and funding them and setting policy. And today, we're thrilled to have State Representative Ashley Gantt from District 109. State Representative, thank you for being on the program.
Thank you, Javier. You forgot to mention that I'm a former trust member.
I was going to get there. Okay, you just stole my... No, so I should have started with that because that is the #1 accomplishment, right? So yes, you were, and I forget what district you were appointed for.
It was Commissioner Monestein's district.
Commissioner Monestein's appointed to the Citizens
yes.
Independent Transportation Trust. That's where you got your start,
yes.
I guess. And then, of course, you took that to greater heights now at the State House.
Yes, very different experience.
Not as collegial, right?
Not at all. I definitely enjoyed my experience as a trust member, and it was eye-opening. I grew up in Miami, and Miami from the 90s is very different from Miami now, and especially when it comes to transportation. And of course, I wasn't driving when I was growing up, but it just... I understand it in a different way, and being on the trust allowed me to really understand the logistical genius that engineers and planners and everything that goes into it. So it was very informative, and actually it laid the foundation for me to be informed when I'm in committees or if I have bills and I'm like, well, I remember this from the trust, and I can ask questions that are informed. I learned this new vocabulary word. It's called ultra-crepidarian.
Wow.
And that means...
I couldn't say that if I wanted to.
It means making an opinion on something that experts usually opine on without having any knowledge.
Okay.
And so I learned that because it was very
There's a lot of that
relevant,
that goes around, right?
correct, in Tallahassee, for sure. And so my experience on the trust allows me to be a lot more informed when I'm particularly speaking to FDOT and the Miami-Dade Transportation Department.
And it's a hot topic everywhere you go.
Yes.
Right. I think if you were to ask Miamians what are the top 3 issues, that's clearly one among them. Affordable housing is probably the other, and maybe climate change, and they all interrelate.
Yes.
So, and the state has a prominent role in terms of transportation policy, and then funding a lot of these projects. So we have the Florida Department of Transportation, and locally we know it as District 6, and hello, Secretary Miller. Nice to see you. And they are, of course, instrumental and behind a number of transportation projects. So what is your interaction with FDOT, and particularly as it relates to either policy statewide or as it relates to your particular district?
Well, so I'm going into my sophomore year as a legislator, or
congratulations
sophomore term.
On your reelection.
Thank you. So in 2022, when I was first elected, my goal was to meet with all the agencies and to really understand, what are you doing? Because people often say, well, this doesn't exist, but it actually does. You just don't know it, right? And I often use this example of I was drinking water from an Olympic pool with a straw that had holes in it, okay? So imagine that task of just consuming so much information all the time. And this is aside from my professional life, right, where I'm a lawyer and I have to remember we have new rules and case law that comes out all the time. So
information overload both ways, right?
All the time. And so my interaction with FDOT, I had a meeting with FDOT, state and local Miami FDOT officials. We talked about what's going on, different projects. For me, it was very helpful to distill that FDOT controls certain areas or certain roads, right, versus the county. And so I would get people like, hey, such and such, and I'm like, well, where is it? What street? And something as simple as that was very helpful for me to know who to go to. And a lot of times constituents just don't know, they'll contact me for something federal, and I'm like, well, right, let me connect you with my federal partner, which is Congresswoman Wilson, which thankfully, I have a tremendous relationship with all of my elected officials in my district. So let me tell you what my district is. I like to say, and I really believe this, I have the best district in the state of Florida.
I hear that from every state representative that comes here.
I'm biased, but I think I'm correct. It's the center of the county, actually. Okay. So coming from the north end, it looks like a little seahorse on the map. So from the north end, I have Opelika, and I come down between 32nd Avenue and 17th Avenue. So it's a lot of unincorporated Dade County, all the way down to Alapata that we swoop over. So on the south end, my southern border is the river. Okay. So we swoop over Alapata into historic Overtown, and
Little
I have, West Little River.
Okay.
Yeah. And then like North River Drive, that's south where the courthouse is and all of that, that's my border with the next rep. And then I have all of downtown. So on the east side, everything west of Biscayne Boulevard from 22nd Street all the way down to Flagler is mine.
Oh, wow.
So it's a diverse district with the people, the socioeconomic status, the landscape, because we have the high rises in downtown. What does transportation mean and look like to downtown, where a lot of people talk about the Metro Rail, the Metro Mover, those type of things. And then we move over to the more residential areas like Alapata and Liberty City and Brownsville, to unincorporated Dade, what we call the West Little River, and Crestview area to Opelika. That's where we're talking about the North Corridor and the bus routes over there. And even in consideration with, I have the most Miami-Dade campuses in my district. I have 4 of the 8. Wow. I'd like to brag.
Shout out to President Pumariega, who was on the program a couple weeks ago.
She is phenomenal. She's an amazing role model. I look up to her a lot with her leadership. But looking at what does transportation look like for students that commute to the Miami-Dade campuses. And so it's a smorgasbord of things when it comes to transportation. And so when I met with FDOT, it was kind of like an overview of like what they do, different projects coming up. I asked them to keep me posted because, like you said, traffic is a big thing. And so when there are different projects, I'm like, send me the notices so that I can at least send it out and people know, like maybe I have to reroute myself because construction is happening. So that was my first 2 years. These next 2 years, I have a lot more foundational information and understanding. So I'll be digging my heels in a lot more, especially about the North Corridor and what's going on with that.
Which runs right through your district.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
So the North Corridor, again, for people who've been living under a rock at this point, because we've been talking about it for decades, is a planned Metro Rail extension from the current MLK station up 27th Avenue to the Broward County line.
Yeah.
And that is one of the corridors that FDOT is responsible for moving forward.
Yes.
Okay. So one of the most important corridors. We've been talking about it forever. I know that we recently received an update from FDOT that they are moving it forward. It's going to take some time. And it's going to require, a great deal of funding that isn't necessarily already in hand.
Yes.
Do you think that the state is going to be prepared to play a role in helping to fund that project? I mean, if FDOT is pushing the project, you would think that they're committed to it, right?
Well, I really hope so, because when we talk about looking at, so I'm going to say I hope so, right? And that's me being very optimistic about the next X amount of years and looking at how is it going to be funded, the plans that are in place for projected building and so on and so forth. I'm not sure what that is right now. So that means I have to come back and provide an update after I ask some questions, because next Tuesday, so this weekend, I'll be traveling back up to Tallahassee to get sworn in. So officially, our new term will begin next week. And so just understanding like what is FDOT's plans going forward with the North Corridor, because it's been a lot of years of nice words, but not necessarily action, because we still don't have it.
Right.
So, I'll be working with my Miami Gardens rep and partners up there, and Senator Jones. So that's primarily Senator Jones's district as well.
Right?
Yeah,
who was also on the podcast. I have to say, I've had you all. This is great.
Yeah, I have 3 different senators, and he has the bulk of my district.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
And so, I'm hopeful as well. I mean, I certainly seem to get the sense that at least our local district is committed to the project. What happens at the state level and in Tallahassee is a little more foreign. But I do get the sense that at the state level, that certainly the state is more auto-oriented and that they don't always understand our needs here in Miami-Dade are different and that are more transit-oriented. And that oftentimes we have to play defense up in Tallahassee to keep them from taking money for transit and putting it towards roadway.
Yeah.
Do you, and there was, I think, a recent battle over that particular issue. Do you foresee that coming back, where they're going to keep attempting to take those transit dollars and putting it into
I hope not.
roadway?
So that road issue, I was vehemently against it. I do believe in the home rule, and because Florida is so diverse, from the Panhandle to the Keys, you have just completely different communities.
Right.
Some of my North Florida colleagues, it'll take an hour for them to drive from one end to the next of their district because they're in rural Florida and the county.
And that's without traffic. It's just large.
It's just large, right?
Here, an hour will take us 3 blocks.
Right. And, for me, I'm like, okay, it might take me like an hour to get from downtown to Opelika, and that's because of traffic. And so I think the biggest part is educating my colleagues. Fortunately, we have a speaker from Miami-Dade County, Speaker Designate Perez. So I'm very hopeful that he'll advocate, especially because like the North Corridor can alleviate a lot of congestion on the roads, and it'll just make it an easier commute. I have friends that have taken 95 Express that live in Broward to downtown and they work at the courthouses. That's such a relief, to have that easy access transportation. And it takes out the one, road rage, okay?
Right.
Because road rage is real.
I think we perfected it here.
Absolutely. I have to listen to audiobooks now so I can contain my road rage. But the North Corridor will allow working families to come to the city. When you look at Miami Gardens, when you look at Opelika, the Westview area, Little River, you have a lot of professionals that if they don't work in downtown, they might work down south, or they might work in Broward. But the fact of the matter is having that ability for them to get on public transportation, have less people on the roads in such a tremendous area. And it also, during games, that North Corridor,
and that stadium
nuts.
Is year-round now, right? It's more than just football. It's got the tennis tournament. It's got F1. It's a series of concerts. I mean, it's become a 365 destination. Yeah.
And so that allows for fans to also use public transportation, which is a benefit to the county. So, I'm hopeful.
Okay.
We'll see. And I will definitely get an update and bring that back. So, I'll advocate, and advocating might look different for me. It might mean that I need to be quiet. So I'll, assess how I need to advocate for the North Corridor, especially, and go from there.
And I've learned that as well. Sometimes the less said, the better. You can really step on landmines, trying to do the right thing, but not realizing that might have a backlash. Right?
Yeah.
Undermine what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah. So that's my next goal, to see, what the substantive plans are in my district. Some crosswalks, little simple things like that can enrich the quality of life. So going back to what you mentioned earlier about affordable housing and climate change, all of those in tandem speak to the quality of life that our community, that my constituents have in Miami-Dade County. And I'm very committed to if this part of Miami, that's a wealthy part of Miami, has A, B, and C, and that provides to their quality of life, or adds to their quality of life. My community also deserves A, B, and C. And so the first 2 years was a lot of learning about what is missing, why is it missing, who's responsible. And so now I have those answers to those questions.
Yeah, as you said, you have your foundation, and now you're going to start building on that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Now, how do you, okay, and I really try not to talk politics here, so we won't get into politics per se, but how do you, as a member of a minority party, effectuate change? Because it's much harder when you're in the minority, obviously, to move bills. So how does that work?
So I believe a good idea is a good idea, period. And so I'm not restricted at supporting something that's a good idea and can be good policy, even if it's not from my party or my caucus. As a freshman, it was a lot of learning how the system works, right? And building relationships. So I was able to get 2 bills passed because one was very, like, it hit home for me as a woman attorney. I passed the lactation spaces in courthouses bill. Okay. And so prior to running for office, I was always involved in volunteer bar organizations and with the Florida Bar. And without fail, every year, multiple times a year actually, there would be a lawyer who would just return to work from maternity leave crying about either having a pump in the bathroom and dispose of the milk, or not having a place, or having to go to her car, sit in the car, being late to court, or, judges have become a lot more understanding, but the judge is not even allowing them to go pump and becoming engorged. Like, all of these things, people don't really think about unless it hits home for you, right. Or if you have someone that you're close to experiences it. So it had been introduced for a lot of years, which I was not aware of. And then perfect timing, I guess. And I did a lot of work. So let me not even,
no doubt.
let me not, shortchange myself. But yeah. I did a lot of work lobbying that bill with the now outgoing speaker and with my colleagues, because it's important. So that was one. And the other one was a claims bill for Leonard Cure for being wrongly incarcerated for over 15 years. And that was kind of a full circle moment. Sometimes you're like, am I supposed to be here? You have all these philosophical questions that you ask yourself. And you're like, I was asking myself this my first term, and I was like, what did I do to my life?
It's not easy. Shuttling back and forth to Tallahassee.
It's not, and
you don't do it for pay.
Hello. That's what I was about to say. It's a part-time legislature. Yeah. And you still have, if you're not independently wealthy, you're still working full-time.
Right.
And you're there at least half of the year, going back and forth. And when you're home, it doesn't end. And so I had those very, introspective questions, like, what did I just do to my life? I am a public figure. I can't go to Target and just shop anymore. People recognize me. That's the craziest part, honestly. Like, I miss my anonymity.
Sure.
And so sponsoring this claims bill with Rep. Gottlieb, he was the main sponsor, and I became his prime co-sponsor. I was actually on the conviction review unit that exonerated Mr. Cure before I even imagined running for office. And it was part of, I was the president for the Black Bar Association in Broward, the TJ Reddick Bar Association. And the then state attorney, Mike Satz, asked me to be on the conviction review unit panel, and we reviewed the case. We exonerated him. And then some years later, elected in Tallahassee, asking the legislature to compensate him.
It's meant to be.
I know, it was nuts. And so that goes to a good idea is a good idea.
Yeah. And by the way, that's nuts. The fact that even after someone is exonerated, there isn't an automatic restitution. Yeah. You have to go through this whole political process.
Yeah.
And it takes a long time if it happens at all, right?
Yeah, if it happens. Sometimes, fortunately that was able to be supported by all parties.
Okay.
And that process is very interesting where we have a master, I think that's the title, but an attorney in the House who creates this entire report to provide to the committees to understand like what happened, the procedural posture of the case. So the master also has a very big role where they can say, I would support this, or not so much.
Right.
So that's a very interesting process.
Well, that's great. So,
yeah.
So looking forward now to your next 2 years, I'm sure you're already thinking about what your priorities are going to be, what kind of bills you want to pass. So what's going to be your focus these next couple of years?
Well, that's a great question, right? So I'm reserving
Not to put you on the spot.
I'm reserving one bill slot for high school students in my district to propose a bill.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So that's we have 14 bills. So from this year, for 2025 and 2026, we have 7 slots per session.
Right. At the House, you're limited.
To
Senate
7. Senate is unlimited. Yeah.
Lucky
so this term, I'm definitely going to be addressing early learning care. As we see minimum wage increase, that is knocking families off who cannot afford daycare and early learning care for their children. So that's really a workforce issue.
Right.
If they can't afford daycare, someone's staying home. And what does that look like for the workforce when you have qualified employees or potential employees that are not in the marketplace working because they can't afford daycare? So I proposed that bill last term, so I will definitely be bringing that back because it's a workforce issue that we have to address.
It's an economic issue as well. So I'm a member of the Greater Miami Chamber, and they have been pushing that issue as well.
Yeah.
For the reasons you mentioned. It's not just to benefit the workers, it's to benefit the employers who depend on those workers, right? So it's really an economic issue at the end of the day.
Right. And as a small business owner, I understand how important it is and how flexible you have to be when you have a really great employee.
Yeah.
And you want to provide like competitive pay. You want to make sure that they are flexible with whatever their home life is and everything. And so that bill speaks to that.
Right.
Veterans. My brother is a retired Marine. Okay. My oldest brother. And
thank you for your service, brother.
Yes,
Appreciate
Anthony
it. And happy
Gantt,
Veterans Day to
Major
everyone.
Anthony Gantt. He was telling me about this program that they have out in Texas for veteran entrepreneurs.
Okay.
And so it's funny because I had my staff set a meeting up with him. So it was so funny. My staff is like emailing him and he's texting me. I'm like, just go through the process, sir. Like, so he's my oldest brother. So I'm the baby sister and the youngest of the family. So he's just like, what are you doing? But it's a veteran program where I want to make it more palatable for veterans to come to Florida and open businesses and be supported. So I look forward to working with him and the Veteran Affairs with that bill. And those are just 2 of some of the bills that I know. I have a couple like little quirky lawyer tweaks for probate, particularly. I specialize in probate, and so and estate planning. But there's like a little. It relates to businesses, but there's a little tweak in probate that we gotta get done.
Any chance we're going to see you on a transportation committee?
Who knows? We are actually.
Put in for it. We'd love to have you there.
That's a good idea.
Put that CITT knowledge to work.
We just got our, so Speaker Designate Perez restructured how the committees will be going forward these next 2 years. And so...
I heard he's like a dramatic reduction in the number of committees.
Yeah. So he's making it a lot more succinct.
Okay.
And so I have to see, we have our preferences. So he assigns everyone. Mm-hmm. But we have our preferences where we can say, well, I would like to be here. I would like to be here. I may or may not try to annoy him every chance I get when I see him, like, hey, please put me on this committee. But that's coming up. So after we get sworn in, we'll be submitting our preferences, and then we'll get our assignments. And we actually go back in December, the first week of December, for our first committee weeks. And then we're up there from January and February for 6 weeks, 3 weeks in January, 3 weeks in February. Yeah. And then every odd year session is from March to May. Every even year is from January to March. So
yeah, I've never understood why they do that.
So I think it's to give us space, because we get elected every 2 years. So it's to give us space, because the odd year.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah.
And then so after we end in May, we'll have from May until probably like September. In September or maybe October, we'll start committee weeks, depending, because it's the holidays. So we have to have those 6 weeks for committee weeks between those couple months, and then we start right back in January up there.
Never ends, right?
No, it doesn't.
Groundhog Day. So, yeah. Representative, we're out of time, but I want to leave with just one last question. So Tallahassee is very far. It's hard for people from Miami-Dade County to make their way up there, to make their case, to plead for something. So for people who might have an issue or just want to understand what's happening at the state level, how can they become engaged? Do they go through your office? What would you recommend?
That's a really fantastic question,
okay,
Javier. Thank you for asking that. So how do they stay engaged? First, one of the high level, like very easy ways is to watch the Florida channel. Literally everything we do.
Especially if you're having a hard time sleeping. Just turn it. I'm sorry. It's really fascinating.
I started a book club at the library, and a lot of the Miami-Jackson Senior High School students come there.
Okay.
So I was telling them yesterday, I had the book club, our first one of this new school year. I was like, politics is a lot of drama.
It is.
And I was like, and I am the drama. And so I told them, I was like, I need you all to watch the Florida channel. So everybody can watch the Florida channel. It's thefloridachannel.com on your phone or the internet. And you can contact your representative. So if you don't know who represents you, you can do Find My Representative, Florida. Put in your address and that information pops up. For me, I am very active on social media. I'm a true millennial, and I have Gen Z staff. So they have me doing stuff. They're like, all right, Rep, do this. And I'm like, okay,
Feel free to share your handles with everybody. You're like
Gantt for Florida everywhere.
Okay. So FOR?
FOR okay. On Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. I love my little tickety talk. And then on Twitter, it's just the number 4.
Okay.
But it's Gantt for Florida everywhere.
And you have a district office?
I do. My district office is at the Joseph Caleb Center.
Okay.
It's in Building C, so it's not the main building. It's off to the side near the daycare and the auditorium.
So if social media isn't your thing, go knock on the door.
Oh, and my constituents know.
Yeah.
They are.
They're there.
My office is well frequented by my constituents.
You're in a very convenient location, I have to say, because a lot happens there at the Caleb Center.
And it's easy parking. Good. It's accessible for all abilities and everything. So contact your representative, and our emails, we get those emails. We might get hundreds at a time sometimes, which makes it very hard for us to read, but I make sure that my staff is very responsive, because that's my job. That's our job. So that's Wonderful. How they can stay involved. And I would encourage everyone to stay involved, because politics and what we do in Tallahassee affects every single part of your life.
Right. Look, and if you're going to do your job at representing the people, it's in your title. You need to know what they want you to do, right?
Yeah. For sure.
State Representative, thank you so much for being here today. Thank you for your service. I know it's not all, as glorious as people seem to think it is. It's really a lot of work, as we said earlier, for very little to no pay. And thank you also for your service on the CITT many years ago. So when you're done with this job, come on back to us. We'd love to have you.
It would actually be a pleasure and a lot less pressure. Thank you, Javier, and thank you to the board, to the trust for their service, to you, who from the very moment we met has been just a really great person, like a kind person, and I appreciate that.
Good. I'm faking it well. It's really good. So, folks, that's all the time we have here for this segment of Mobility Matters. If you're interested in serving on the CITT, like the representative did, we do have vacancies, and if we don't have a vacancy in your district, we'll hold on to your application for when that vacancy becomes available. So please apply. You can visit us at myamidade.gov /CITT. Please, if you want to be a part of the solution and you're interested in transportation, this is one way to do it. Find us here every couple of weeks on Thursday from 9 to 10 a.m. And finally, we want to thank our partners here at Miami's Community Newspapers for hosting us in this lovely space and for producing the program.